All right, welcome everyone to today's episode of Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, Arutz Sheva, and the show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. You can also email me, messiahhour@gmail.com. This show is available to download on JApp. That's a Jewish application that has a lot of different shiurim from big rabbis, again, as well as episodes of this program. You can download JApp from iTunes or from Google Play Stores or from the website www.j-app.me. Of course, it is the 80th anniversary of the Yortzeit of the famous Rabbi Rav Kook, and on the line to talk about a party celebrating that Yortzeit is a Jewish educator from Beit Rav Kook, as well as Gabbai of a minyan that's going to be starting up, Rabbi Itzhak Marmorstein. Rabbi, how you doing out there?
Shalom Alecha. Thank God, and hope you're well.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on. Let's talk about first with Rav Kook, because many say he was the most influential Zionist rabbi. Really, he came out at a time when a lot of rabbis were not in the favor of Zionism, didn't believe in the idea of this mass immigration to Israel. He opposed them. I want to know about his legacy, his influence, and maybe the idea that more people are coming around to his ideas. So tell us about that aspect.
Well, it's all true. And more. He was born in 1865, and he was mentored as a young man already by the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir Cohen, who was the leader of the Jewish world at that time. And he recognized from a young child and as a young man, Rav Kook was an extraordinary human being, an extraordinary Torah scholar, an extraordinary soul, and an extraordinary Jewish leader. And he mentored him, even though he was at that time the greatest Talmid Chacham at the Volozhin Yeshiva and was going to be the Rosh Yeshiva of the most incredible yeshiva. The Chafetz Chaim mentored him, directed him to become a community rabbi, and he went at the age of 23 to start being a rabbi in Zoimel and then Boisk. And but even in yeshiva, he was already known for speaking Hebrew. He in many ways predated the Zionists, the modern Zionists. He was speaking Hebrew, and it's the first time many people at the yeshiva heard Hebrew as a spoken language, because he was asked to be the rabbi of Purim. You know, the top student is always the Purim Rav, and he would give drashot in Hebrew at the Volozhin Yeshiva. And in a year and a half that he studied there, he went through Shas 17 times. And so the Chafetz Chaim said, the Jewish people need you. You have to go out and be a rabbi, and you'll be the leader of Israel. And he, at the age of 39, he was asked to come to Israel to be the chief rabbi of Yafo. His father-in-law, the Aderet Zatzal, was already the assistant chief rabbi in Jerusalem, who had come over like a decade earlier. And this was, and then Rav Kook came in 1904. Significantly, if we talk about his influence, the first day that he landed, he came to Israel, was the 28th of Iyar. And every year from that point on, Rav Kook and his family observed the 28th day of Iyar as a special day, the day the Kook family returned to Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Kook was a Kohen, as was the Chafetz Chaim. And the Chafetz Chaim directed him to learn the halachot of the Beit HaMikdash, because it may not happen in the Chafetz Chaim's life, but perhaps in Rav Kook's life, the Kohanim are going to need to know what to do and go learn all the halachot of the Beit HaMikdash. Equipped with all that, he shows up in Israel on the 28th of Iyar, and today we celebrate 28th of Iyar. That's Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. That was the third day of the Yom Kippur, of the Six-Day War, and the day we came back to Jerusalem and Har HaBayit. And Rav Kook, it's on the anniversary of the day Rav Kook first stepped foot in the land of Israel. So his role in many ways was of the Kohen Gadol of the emerging Beit HaMikdash. That was not yet, but since Rav Kook was such an extraordinary tzaddik, and tzaddikim on that level are said to bring the light of the future into the present. He was already in his consciousness, in the consciousness of what it is when we make, Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh, and the Garden of Eden. So he was like tasting of that, and much of his Torah is really the Torah of the Garden of Eden. His Torah basically represents the most progressive and holistic explanation of the entire Torah. That's complete integration with everything that preceded him. He was considered, and is considered, the person who explains the Ari, Isaac Luria, more than anybody else, because his entire Torah is an explanation of Lurianic Kabbalah, but without any of the language and the lingo. So he really brings it in such a way that it's accessible to any intelligent person who really wants to learn. So he's an extraordinary treasure, and without him we may not have made the transition to Eretz Yisrael in the way that we did. And had we followed him completely, the transition would have been even better. I hate to say such a thing. We wouldn't have even had a Holocaust had people listened to him when he told people to return to Israel.
Interesting point about the Chofetz Chaim. He went as far, he was a left-handed man, he went as far as to train himself to write right-handed because left-handed Kohanim were not allowed to serve in the Beit HaMikdash, and he assumed that the temple was going to be rebuilt in this time, or hoped so, and wanted to be right-handed so he could serve. Just an interesting thought about the Chofetz Chaim. What I want to know is the concept of Zionism is considered very much nowadays a secular thing for some reason, but again, you have Chofetz Chaim, you have Rav Kook. Are people adapting?
It starts from much earlier than that. If you allow me to, there's first of all, the structure of Jewish time is such that we go through 6 units of experience and then have the 7th fulfillment, 6 days of the week, Shabbat. The Zohar explains that so too in the 7,000-year history, which the Torah posits that we're in, the first 6,000 years are the historical, and then we have 1,000 years of, the Messianic age. But in the Zohar it says, at the beginning of the last millennium, at the beginning of the point 5,000, the last 1,000 years of our history, the 2 things are going to start to happen. The children of Israel are going to return to Israel. And the first person to return to Israel was already, the first Zionist act in modern time was 1269. The Ramban came with that teaching. He found 2 Jews. The Zohar itself came out in 1240. The Zohar came out at the point of 5,000. The Ramban, who was the main teacher of the generation, came here in 1269. He found 2 Jews in the old city, and he sets up a synagogue. And then, 300 years later, Isaac Luria, the Ari, was born in the old city of Jerusalem, and he then went as a young man to meditate on the River Nile, on the Zohar. He heard he had a student, and he went to Tzfat at the age of 36, and 36, 37. He died within 2 years of a plague, but in those 2 years, he taught what we know as, Kabbalah Ta'ari to his students, Chaim Vital and others, and it has 2 main elements. The 2 elements are the whole teaching about what the tree of life is and its multidimensionality, everything that he expanded. That was one, the whole Lurianic Kabbalah. The second thing, though, is he says, for Geula to happen, we really have to start returning to Eretz Yisrael. And then the people, his teachings went down through the Ramchal and then to the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon, and they started sending people back to Eretz Yisrael. The Hasidim that came in the late 1700s, early 1800s, were students of the Baal Shem Tov, and particularly the Vilna Gaon was very strong about that. And he began the process of what we call Mashiach ben Yosef, the return to Israel, and the creation of the basis for the physical infrastructure that would allow Israel to live, just like Joseph was responsible for the infrastructure that allowed the Jews to live. And then Rav Kook, when Rav Kook come, he represents the next step, which is the beginning of Mashiach ben David, when the spirit starts to become infused with the matter. So, for example, Herzl died within a month after Rav Kook came to the land of Israel. Herzl was in Europe, and Rav Kook spoke about it at his Shloshim, and it was all an explanation of the unfolding of Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. And Rav Kook I see very much as the beginning of the light of Mashiach ben David into our history.
What would you say, though, when people say Herzl did not give his son a Brit Milah, Herzl was very anti-religious, and
the same way, that's what Rav Kook explains, the same way that theoretically Joseph was assimilated and married an Egyptian, but yet what he did was provided the physical infrastructure that ensured the Jews could survive. The entire secular movement that's doing that, they're doing it underneath it, they're serving the unfolding of God's will and the return to Israel, and sometimes they need to break certain things in order to build something even greater.
Well, when you say certain things, do you mean the mitzvot?
The situation was such that the religious Jews did not have what it took to create a state. They just were too locked into whatever, and it needed somebody who said, I'm just going to do anything to build the thing, and even if it means, letting go of halakha, I'm not going to let anything stop me. So on the outside, that looks terrible. On the inside, they're fulfilling God's will and bringing about the fruition of Israel.
So the thing is that when Rav Kook says it's the footsteps of Israel, but Israel, as we know, this is not a propaganda show. It's got a lot of issues. There are issues with poverty. There are issues with war. There are issues also with, I want to say assimilation, but most people in Israel are Shomer Shabbat, so they're not the majority. So if Rav Kook were alive nowadays, how would he explain that, or how did he explain some of these things previously?
He said we're in the process of the unfolding, the fruition, the culmination of all the prophecies. If he was to step into Eretz Yisrael now, after he passed away in 1935, and it's 80 years since he passed away, if he would see the thriving of Israel, the extraordinary productivity that is coming out of Israel, the spirituality that's popping up in Tel Aviv as young families are looking for ways to teach their children and creating tefillah and Talmud Torah of all sorts that has never been before. And these are many of them the grandchildren of the ones who dropped religion. And he would see the extraordinary Mesirat Nefesh of Tzahal and the Kedusha of that Mesirat Nefesh. And then the extraordinary creativity and productivity comes because when we're training our children to the highest level of skills, because we want to protect ourselves, Pikuach Nefesh, he would see the extraordinary holiness of what's going on in Israel and say, don't judge Botswana on the outside. Look at what's happening on the inside, and you'll recognize, God's love unfolding in history.
Again, this is a prophecy on Israel National Radio, Route Sheva. The show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're continuing the conversation with Rabbi Itzhak Marmorstein. Rabbi, let's talk about the so-called white elephant in the room and the fact that a lot of people see a difference between Zionism and religious Judaism. And now I'm not saying I agree with that, but do you think we'll get to a point soon where people will look at that as one and the same, meaning religious Jews pray 3 times a day to come back to Israel, even if they don't live in Israel, etc.? What do you think is going to happen in the near future?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that there'll be a fusion of the Torah with our lives, but in such a way that it'll be it won't look like what it did in Europe. The model isn't just to recreate what we have in Europe and stay really loyal to that. And you see in the Dati Leumi world the fusion of the modern and the Torah and in all the various ways, and but God's will for good is much more powerful than anything else, and so and the fact that the children of Israel are all of them, religious or non-religious, are the children of Abraham and Sarah, the extraordinary Kedusha will pour forth.
Now, one of the things that I want to discuss with you is We're going to talk about the event later on with the Yortzeit of Rav Kook. But
it's not the Yortzeit, it's the 80th year.
The 80th year. Yeah, the 80th year. What I want to know is this: what got you into Rav Kook? Because obviously you're a huge fan and you know his teaching. So what propelled you into learning more about Rav Kook?
Well, in my own personal history, I'm an only child of Holocaust survivors, and who came to Israel in 1948 after experiencing the ravages of the Holocaust and losing a large percentage of their family. So I grew up here in Israel, knowing something bad, really bad, had happened. And then we moved to Canada at a certain point, and I got to know the larger world. But I was always seeking the understanding of what is this world about, and what is the reality we're in, and how are we to understand history and the horrible things that happen. And then at a certain point I became a serious student of Torah. Again, I returned to Israel in my early 20s and really began to be serious about learning Torah. I became a Jewish educator and taught Jewish high school in Canada. And one day I was in Winnipeg and I sat down with a book in the summer of Rav Kook's writings, a translation of a selection of his books, and I started to read it. And immediately, as soon as I started to read, I understood that this is the most illuminated expression of the Torah that we have in our time, and that the author of these words was in an extraordinary state of connection with the divine presence and had an extraordinary grasp of the Torah, so that what he wrote and what he's taught represents the best, most complete understanding of the Torah that we have in modern times. And then I just started to read it with my friends and students, and many people had the same feeling and enthusiasm that this is an extraordinary Torah that the world needs to hear. Rav Kook is known as a neshama klali, a universal soul. He's really giving expression to the universal Torah in such a way that no one else has. It was hinted at in the people before him, but he gives it the most fullest expression. And if you're a serious Torah student, you really want to study the Torah with the most understanding and most contemporary. And there's no question that that's Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Kook, Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
A last question I want to ask you before we go to break. You see that Rav Kook was able to understand the Torah and understand we need to come to Israel. There are many Jewish scholars, many brilliant men who learn the Torah and don't come to Israel, don't think it may be such a big deal. I don't know exactly. Why do you think that is? I know that's a big question, but I want to get your perspective.
Look, everybody makes all sorts of decisions. I can't speak for anybody else's decisions, but they're ultimately, I can understand, the great teachers, just like, people stayed in Babylon before returning because they had to teach and they had to learn with their great students. And there's certainly the need for Torah to be studied and learnt everywhere. So you need Torah students and great rabbis everywhere. But those people that say that it's not necessary to return to Israel to fulfill the Torah are like, it's a mistake that's unfortunately a certain holdover from the past that is a mistake.
All right, we're going to take a break, and before we do, I just want to make a couple announcements. I said earlier in the program, first of all, I'm on JApp, which is a Jewish application that has a shiurim of big rabbis as well as episodes of this program. You can download JApp from iTunes or Google Play stores or from the website www.j-app.me. And you can find this program on YouTube under the Messiah Hour. Click in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis. Type that in, I should say, and find the program. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. Tell your friends and family about it. The more people I get to describe, the higher I get up in the YouTube searches. And you can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. If you have any topics you want me to discuss in the future, any guests you want me to interview, any comments, email me there, and we'll try to get things done. After the break, we'll talk more about who is Rabbi Greg Walls and the relationship with him and Rabbi Itzhak Marmorstein. This is It Prophecy on IsraelNationalRadio.com.
It's the good that I desire. Her broad expanses entrance me. Her lips, her roses I kiss. Her glorious vision exalts me. Absolute good, without limitation, without end, constriction, or boundary, that does not separate from anyone alive. Good for me and for all. Good without bad or tightness. Good full of pleasure for all. Full of tranquility, without anxiety. Good forever, good right now, good for every people and nation. For all who seek for the good and not for the bad, and the light and the delight as the one is there. Good right now, good for every people and nation.